This is going to be a short one today because it's kind of hot as balls here in the tiny studio. And once I get done here, I get to go home and edit upstairs in my house where it is also hot as balls, as I mentioned. So I'm looking forward to that. A lot of the things that I talk about in these videos that are more of the, I don't want to say esoteric, maybe more theoretical, a lot of them come up in conversations that I have with guys that I play with, play games with, paint with, whatever. We are talking about things online with chatting kind of thumbs, or actually face to face or whatever. And things come up, and then I think to myself, that might be a good video topic. And one of those topics is what I'm going to be talking about today. Almost 5 years ago, my wife and I bought a house, and we bought it from her grandparents. Underneath the stairs is a little room, and you think that this is going to get spooky, but it's not. There's a little room, and her grandfather, my wife's grandfather, used to write down there. He had a typewriter, and books, and a little tape recorder thing, and all that stuff. And when you buy a house from family, they have a tendency to leave things behind, which you wouldn't do if you were selling the house to somebody you didn't know. So I cleared all that stuff out, and that little room underneath the basement is now my airbrush room. I told you all of that to tell you about this. Above the door, on the way into that little room, is a piece of paper, which is literally, looks like it was eaten partially by bugs, and it's cut out and it's a strange shape. You can kind of see it here. And it has some calligraphy on it, some hand-done calligraphy, and it says something along the lines of, the price of perfection is prohibitive. And I looked at that when I first saw it, and I said, I don't know what that means. I have no idea. But I just left it up because I was working on other stuff. I had to paint down there and do a bunch of other jazz. Long story short, it's still there. And the reason it's still there is because it's actually, I think, a very important thing for us as gamers, people who like to paint our miniatures, for us to think about. This is the Butcher. You can see him. He is from Privateer Press, and he is a model that I painted years ago. Well, when I say painted, I say partially painted. I say painted up to a point. This is long enough ago that I used to play War Machine. I don't play anymore, but I was a Khador player. I bought this figure, and I started painting it. And I didn't like kind of where it was going, and I thought, well, maybe if I could do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and change things, and what if I repaint this part? And then I thought, what if I just strip the whole thing? And then it just died. I just stopped painting it. And it's been sitting, stuck to a little pill bottle, like I do, for probably 4 years now, at least, maybe longer. And that's kind of the point of this video, and the point of that kind of bug-eaten piece of paper above my airbrush room door. The price of perfection is prohibitive. If you constantly try in your miniature painting to try to get as perfect as possible, it has some prices that you have to pay. Now, if you are a painter who is trying to get a prize, a crystal brush, a golden demon, if they even do those anymore, I don't know, or whatever, a draconic award from the WGC, then yeah, you should try to get as close to perfect as you possibly can. You'll never hit it. And I'm not just being a dick saying, well, you'll never get perfection. It's because perfection is an ideal. People don't get to perfection generally. I was told in art school when I was in college that if you ever make a piece of artwork that you are 100% happy with, completely happy, there's nothing you'd change, you should probably quit. Because either A, you've hit the pinnacle and you're the first human who ever has, or B, you've kind of given up a little bit and you're like, yep, I wouldn't change anything. Well, what about this thing here? This is kind of screwed up. Nope, wouldn't change it. See, then you should probably quit. But if you're just trying to get painted figures on the table so you don't look like one of those guys who rolls up with just a bunch of gray plastic or gray metal or gray resin or whatever, if you want to get to that point where you have things that you're happy with, you can be happy with something without being ecstatic about it or without it being perfect. And with the Butcher, if I would have just kind of said, well, I'm just going to finish and plow through, he'd be done now. I don't know what I'd do with him because I don't play War Machine anymore, but he'd be done. And he kind of is, you know, that kind of thing is an indicator of like, well, if I'm afraid to go forward. I don't want to go forward because I'm going to screw it up. That's not what you want to do when you're painting miniatures. If anything, you want to just blunder ahead. If you're just, you know, like I've got all these guys, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to paint them. You do some testing and you kind of figure it out. You know, I've talked about that in the past in other videos. Coming up with a test model, coming up with a process. But if you're like, I just don't know if I can pull that off, well then don't. Just go on. If you're thinking, I don't know if I can perfectly do the blending on that sword, he's a gaming model, he's a tabletop model, or she, you know. But just go ahead, just keep pushing, keep going. The more you paint, the better you'll get at it. The more you sit and think about painting and going, I don't know if I should do this, I don't know, that will not help you much at all, frankly. If you are, like I said, a display painter who's trying to win a really good award, a lot of them paint very slowly. I was just talking to my friend Tom Ailes, who I interviewed in the past here on this very channel, the last American Slayer sword winner, if I may. And he takes all year to paint stuff to get to the crystal brush. He's a very slow painter. But there are other painters, like Sam Lenz, Tau salesman, who can paint very, very quickly. I've watched him do it, and it is magic. But you have to figure out how fast you can paint, how good you can paint, and just paint, go forward. You're working with tabletop miniatures. You're working with stuff that you're going to use and push around and get Cheeto fingers on. Just paint. Maybe take more time on the HQ units, that's cool, but just paint. Just don't try to strive for perfection, especially if you've just started. Paint some stuff, learn from it, and move on, and then paint some more stuff. There'll always be stuff to paint, and you can always, always learn more from doing it.